Fresno. And I went by the rescue mission there, and I was shocked to see the amount of homeless people that were there. Because I used to go by that, quite regularly, and it was always a community under the overpass. But this time when I went down there, the tents were lined up all along the street and down a side street. They were just spilled out kind of everywhere, and I could tell there were more families because I could see kids, and there were pets roaming around, and it was very sad. And I just thought to myself, gosh, what must it be like to be homeless? And it was right then that God gave me my very own parable. And he said, Lori, you do know what it's like to be homeless. And just like the parables in the Bible, I had no idea what he was talking about. And I said, Lord, you're speaking me in code because I've never been homeless. I don't know what it's like. And he said, shh, listen. And he wasn't talking about not being without a physical place to live. He was talking about not having a home for my heart. And I know what it's like to have a homeless heart. So when I was 7, my parents, they got divorced, and my dad remarried, and he was just busy with our step-family. And my mom got together with an alcoholic, and she was focused on him all the time. And I just was kind of there, stuck in the middle, feeling like I didn't really have anywhere to go. And it was then that the core beliefs of feeling like I didn't belong and feeling unworthy embedded themselves in me and cemented in me a homeless heart. Of course, then I didn't know it. It all happens on a subconscious level. But and I carried that around for many years. But looking back, I can see how the core beliefs of feeling like I didn't belong and feeling unworthy drove my decision making. I moved back and forth between my parents all through junior high and high school, just really searching desperately for a home for my heart, with every attempt being futile. And I would try joining things. And it was hard because I never really stayed anywhere long enough to get established. And then you couple that with the uncomfortableness of feeling like you don't belong anyway. So I usually didn't stick things out long enough for it to have a positive effect on me. But, I would try anyway. And it was kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I would say, I want to go do that. And I'd say, well, if you go, you're just going to feel like you don't belong. But I would try. And sure enough, I'd get there and I'd feel like an outcast. And then I'd quit, and I'd say, see, you knew you wouldn't fit in. And through that cycle, I just perpetuated and reinforced those beliefs. So joining didn't really work. So then I got boyfriends, and I traveled down this long, destructive path of bad relationships. Since I wasn't emotionally healthy, neither were the guys I attracted. And I usually ended up doing things I didn't want to do. So with my high school boyfriend, I got pregnant when I was 17. And then on my 18th birthday, I sat all day with several other girls in the lobby in the waiting room of an abortion clinic. Nobody said a word. Nobody smiled. Nobody cleared their throat. We didn't look at each other. We sat there looking down until our name was called, and then we'd get up and still looking at the ground, we'd go in and have our turn. By then, I was already broken up with my boyfriend. I had moved back again to my mom, who lived in Tulsa at the time. So nobody consoled me. When I got home, not a word about it was ever said, reinforcing to my heart that it was homeless. Well, soon after that, I went into the Air Force. And I just knew that everything was going to be better. I was going to be out on my own. I was going to be independent. I was going to be away from my family. It was going to be all brand new. And it was, except for one thing, me. And I hadn't realized yet that all those times of moving back and forth between my parents, that moving or geographics, what we call a geographic cure, they don't fix anything. And really every time I moved, my choices just got worse. So soon after I got to the base I was stationed at, I went to a party, and there was a guy there, and he paid a lot of attention to me, and his name was Buzz. And that should have been my first clue to not get involved. Instead, I married him, and I was 19. He was the type that would steal lumber from a construction site, and he sold pot, and being in the military, I could have gotten in a lot of trouble because of his actions. I put my heart in a home where it wasn't taken care of, and after 2 years, I divorced him. I knew consciously that I was making one bad decision after another. I just didn't know why or how to stop it. So I kept perpetuating my own dysfunction, and I continued to move each time believing that this one would be different. And one of those moves was to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I moved there with a girl that I had met at massage school, where I went when I got out of the Air Force. Well, 2 weeks after moving in and settling into our apartment, she took me to this place on the edge of town called the Dirty Old Tavern. And it was a big deal for her because she grew up Mennonite and she didn't go to those kind of places. For me, the dive bar was the one place I fit in. And that day began my next relationship. And soon after that, I moved in with him. And he didn't just smoke pot, he was a full-fledged needle-using junkie who would regularly disappear for a few days. I knew that dance. And the core beliefs of feeling like I didn't belong and unworthy of love were fulfilled again, and it kept my heart homeless and me trapped in a situation that just continued to reinforce those beliefs. During that time, though, oddly enough, I never blamed him for such an unhappy life because I always knew that there had to be something wrong with me to be with somebody like that. I just didn't know what it was. I didn't know what I didn't know. It was too far down in my subconscious, to be able to see it. And during that time, I hit an all-time low when I found out I was pregnant again. See, by day, I was working at a holistic wellness center. And by night, I was living with a drug addict, and my shame about that ran deep. The religious people, they didn't know about my home life. And one way to keep it that way would be to have another abortion. So I made the appointment for a Saturday morning. But at the same time, there was something going on in me spiritually. There was a pro-life commercial playing on the radio, and I don't remember what it said, except that it was the sweet, tender voice of a little girl asking to live. And suddenly, I just started hearing it over and over and over. You know how that happens? And it spoke to me, and I called and I canceled the abortion. But the Holy Spirit didn't stop there. One morning, I went to work, and when I arrived, my boss called me into her office. I had no idea why. And we sat, our chairs facing across from each other, and she had me put my foot up on her knee, and she began rubbing my foot and proceeded to tell me that she found the doctor's receipt in her car that confirmed I was pregnant. Now, you think I would have guarded that piece of paper with my life because I didn't want them to know. But when I look back on that memory and try to scour the car, I don't see that piece of paper anywhere. It's not on the seat, in the back, on the floor, tucked under. It vanished from my sight and from my mind because God wanted me and God wanted the baby. So my boss told me she told me the story about her daughter getting pregnant, and she talked to me about adoption, and that's what I chose to do. God was reaching out for me. I still couldn't recognize it, but he was reaching out for me. And although my life was a huge mess and I felt trapped in this relationship, I didn't have any money and I was pregnant, that decision was a turning point for me. And I slowly began to go in a positive direction. Another thing that happened that I can now say is a divine appointment was I went home one day when I was 8 months pregnant and I had to go to the bathroom. And so I went into the bathroom and I heard this whimpering from the shower. So I pulled back the curtain. And there was my boyfriend, just freaked out of his mind, at that glazed over, empty look in his eye, paranoid, thinking somebody was coming to get him. Well, I calmed him down, and he went into rehab for the 3rd time that night. And that's how I got started in the 12 steps. God was directing my path. So I went to the family groups at the rehab, and I went to Al-Anon, and 2 weeks after he got out of rehab, about that time, I had the baby. And the adoptive parents were at the